So follow up from last time, we talked about AI, and you had challenged me to figure out what I am going to delegate to AI. And I feel like I'm making progress here, but I still don't have a ton of clarity on what exactly this is going to look like. I will share that I have found this tool. We talked about this in the pro show last time, but this spiral.computer app that I mentioned, I continue to use that and continue to be impressed by the results that it gives me. The trick is that I can drop in my newsletter text and ask for multiple outputs of like a Twitter thread. And then I always have to clean it up a little bit before I publish it. But it definitely gives me a jump start on that kind of stuff. And I've been looking for other tangential ways to do that sort of thing. Like one of the tools that I use to publish to Twitter and now to Threads and LinkedIn and Instagram is Hype Fury. And they have a tool that actually can pull in from your YouTube channel the videos that you've created and turn those into threads. I haven't done a whole lot with that because I tend to write about things in the newsletter before I make the YouTube videos. But this has really got me thinking about how I can repurpose the content that I'm already writing, that I'm already making. And obviously it's not just copy paste, put a bunch of different places, but I think that's really the spot that AI is working for me is in the, I'm not going to say like creating the content, but once I have a start on creating the content, getting it available to share in multiple formats, multiple places, because I recognize that there are people who subscribe to my newsletter. There are people who subscribe to the YouTube channel, people who follow me on whatever social media network. Those people tend not to be the same. As much as I would like to point everything back to the newsletter, I notice that there's quite a few people who will follow me over here, but not over there. And I don't know. I guess I was a little bit surprised by that. So I'm going to continue to try to move in this direction. Like I'm doing the work. I'm writing these newsletters on these topics. I know like the core things I want to say. You know, how do I package that in a way that it's appropriate for these other places that people may want to encounter the stuff that I'm making? But still got quite a bit of work to do here.
Not to go too deep down this rabbit hole, but like, don't you find that hard to manage and hard to balance? And like, where do you get most of your people, like lead generation? Like, where does most of that come from? Any single source, or is it just a mix of all of them put together?
Yeah, well, for me, it's definitely a specific source, and that has been the starter vault that I put together and I promote at the end of the YouTube videos. Although lately I've been pointing people to the newsletter itself as opposed to the starter vault when the topic is appropriate. I think it's important to have a right call to action at the end of the video based on the content in the video. You can't just tag on, hey, before you go, you should check out this other thing. Like people are smarter than that. So I try to keep that in mind when I'm putting together the videos. Like I'm working on a video right now. Hopefully it'll be out by the time this episode goes out. On how I do Bible study in Obsidian. And I'm putting together all of these resources for people for the different ways that you might want to do it, starting from just the King James version of the Bible and the verses as a note format. Plus then there's one which has all the Greek and Hebrew lexicon stuff tagged. Plus then there's one that has all my personal tags and my topical Bibles, and packaging that all up in I have to create that page. I have to create those resources. I have to zip everything up, make sure it all works, create all the systems. But I feel like that's better for that video than just, hey, I make some other stuff on Obsidian. That would definitely be easier, but I think that the appropriate calls to action tend to be a lot better. And then I think when people join your list from that, they have a better first impression of who you are and what you make too. So
yeah, that makes sense.
But yeah, most of it's been YouTube. I've been trying to branch that out a bit. You know, whenever we publish one of these episodes, I frequently mention my mind map file at some point in the episode, not intentionally, but just kind of comes up. I make those available for download because I share those also in my newsletter every week. So typically before the episode goes out, I'll put together a landing page if you want to download the notes for this book, and I'll stick that in the show notes for the episode, and then people can, download that and they'll get future book notes because they're part of the newsletter. But I get, From the co-intelligence one, I think I got 2 the next day. Like, it's not huge. It's a couple here, a
Yeah.
couple there, but you have enough of those things out there, and then it does kind of add up over time. I'm up over 5,700 email subscribers, which, last September, I think it was at like 1,700. So that's
That's awesome.
quite a bit of growth. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good for you. All right, so I'm up on follow-up. So my first one was to plan how to teach more intentionally with AI. I'm still thinking about this. I'm teaching a lot of classes in the fall, so I need to be smart about the way I do this. And this has kind of evolved. I went to a conference between the last time we recorded and now, and this is kind of evolving into less about me planning on how to teach with AI and more I'm thinking about, is there a faculty development opportunity to help other faculty think about AI and how to integrate it in that into their classes and how to integrate it in well. And I think there is an opportunity there. The real question is, do I want to take that on? Like, do I want to take on the fact, and do I think anybody would actually show up to it? Because, if you don't time that well, people just don't care. And they don't have time and their schedule's too busy. So I'm that one's morphing into less about me and my personal classes. Like, I'll still integrate it into my personal classes, but it's more about that faculty development side of things. And then the next one was keep working on developing more in-depth prompts. So I want to continually, like every time I interact with, one of the machine learning tools, I want to think about, like, is this prompt in-depth enough? Is this prompt describing exactly what I want it to do? And, I was driving to work or driving to school today to record the show. And I was listening to our episode, and I remembered even then, like, there's so many more ways that we can prompt these things than you normally think about, and you can guide the prompts and you can tell it exactly what you want it to give you or what you want it to exclude. So that's going to be something that's just going to keep going on and on and on. Every time I interact with one, basically, I'm gonna be thinking about, is this prompt in depth? Is the best way I can word it. Described, does it have a good enough description? Does it have good enough examples? I think I'm going to keep working on those. So no like clear takeaway from them, but the action items definitely helped me to think more critically about the co-intelligence book.
Cool. I need to actually follow up with that because I did something specific based on our discussion of those prompts that I forgot to mention. So
Okay.
I'm building this done for you Obsidian Vault, which has all of my workflows. So task management, journaling, all that kind of stuff. As part of that, I'm going to include, I've got 50 of them so far, but I want to include at least 100 of my book notes files. So it's got a page, which is a data view query that shows the book, it shows the author, it shows the rating. You can change the ratings 1 to 5 stars based on your own ratings of the books. But then the contents of the note actually have the mind map, the markdown notes themselves, all of the quotes and things, which are fueling the quote book, which is, again, already set up for you, and then a 3-sentence summary up at the top. Now, those 3-sentence summaries, typically what I do when I bring notes over is I look through everything that I've captured and I condense it down into three sentences about what are the big ideas from this particular book. However, when I was working on adding all of these, I noticed I had a whole bunch of holes, and I was like, I can't go through that many book notes and create these. So like, maybe AI can help me with this. So what I did is I took some time, but I crafted this prompt that gave me a starting point for the big ideas. And then basically I refined it after that. But that was a huge mental savings. Every time I thought about just even doing one of them, I'm like, oh, that's so hard. Like I can't even. So I'll share the prompt that I used, which I think is kind of interesting. So the first thing I wrote was, "You're my trusted friend who I look to for book recommendations. I want you to give me 3-sentence summaries of various books using my personal writing style. Please look at the example and describe my writing style to me. After that, I want you to ask me for a book title and provide me a 3-sentence summary that matches the style of the example. We'll repeat this for about 100 books. Do you understand? If yes, ask me for the example." Okay, and then it says, "I understand your request. Could you please provide me with the example you mentioned so I can understand your personal writing style better?" And then I gave them the one that I had written from Atomic Habits by James Clear, which is, goals aren't enough to get you where you want to go. You must have a system in place that can get you there. Number 2, very small changes in your daily actions or habits aligned with the identity of the person you want to become compound to significant results over time. Number 3, there are 4 steps to the habit cycle, not 3, that you can leverage to make it easier to take the desired action or avoid the undesired action consistently. Okay, so then from the example provided, here's a summary of your writing style. It says, I'm clear and direct, I'm detailed, practical and actionable advice. Now let's proceed to summarizing a book. And this is where things get interesting, because I asked for, Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg, and it gave me 4 Disciplines of Execution by Chris McChesney, Sean Covey, and Jim Hewling. And the results that I got back were they weren't quite what I was looking for. So after a while, I'm like, let's try that one again, and then it's like, I'd like these points to be a little bit more direct and instructional. Let's try it again. So it revises it again. That's better, but let's be a little bit more descriptive. Okay, so then it tries again. And then after a while, of going back and forth, actually make it a little less instructive or prescriptive. Just describe the key ideas from the book without instruction on what to do with them. It took a while to get here. Don't say the author's name, the book title, or the book in these summaries. Just summarize the ideas. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it keeps trying, and then don't use verbs like delves to describe what happens in the book. Just describe the ideas. Pick something a little more concrete than the third point, which just tells me that there's historical examples. Where's the big idea? And then by the time I get it down, I'm like, okay, let's use this going forward. And then again, like, it's giving me maybe 80% of what I need. I have to tweak every single one of them, but it gives me a starting point based on the contents of the books that are available. And I've also noticed that Raycast has added a feature where you can upload like PDFs and images to the AI as well. So I could theoretically take, like, here's my notes in PDF format from this, now condense this into 3 sentences, but I haven't tried that yet.
So I had 2 questions, or maybe a comment and a question. The first one was, are you using Raycast to do this? So is all that in Raycast?
It's all in Raycast, yeah.
And it will retain these things it's learning, quote unquote learning. It'll retain that?
Well, you can have, there's 2 different types of AI multiple types of AI inside of Raycast, because you can do images too. But basically you can have like the one-off requests, and then if you hit Command J, I think it is, you see all of the chats. So you can actually reference those older chats and continue those conversations in a list in the left sidebar.
Okay. Well, and then the second thing was more of a comment. It's, okay, so even if the 80% is getting you over the hurdle of doing it, that's worth it, right? Because like before you said like, oh man, it's just too monumental. Like, I don't even want to start. Like, my brain is, but if it just says like, oh, well, I'm not starting, the tool is starting for me, and then I'm just tweaking the tool. Like,
exactly.
I mean,
and the difference is that prior to reading Co-Intelligence, I would have given up, because I'm like, it's not getting me where I want it to go.
Yeah.
But I stuck with it, and eventually I got there.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great example.
All right. Well, ready to talk about today's book?
I am ready to talk about today's book.
All right. So today's book is Right Thing, Right Now by Ryan Holiday. This is the 3rd book in the Stoic Values series. And I think I've read every Ryan Holiday book at this point, with the exception of the marketing book that I just heard a couple people talking about, and I think I need to go back and read that one. Trust Me, I'm Lying. Are you familiar with that book?
He wrote it when he was like 20, didn't he? Like he was like super young.
Yeah. And I don't really know the premise of it, but I was listening to Barrett. Do you know who Barrett Brooks is?
I don't.
Okay. So Barrett Brooks is the former COO of ConvertKit.
Okay.
And I met him at the Craft and Commerce conference. I'd actually met him previously too through Sean Blanc. And he's a really smart guy, really got a brain for systems, and went to his talk, and it was really, really good. Anyways, he's got a podcast that he started not too long ago called Good Work. And the most recent episode that I listened to had an interview between him and Nathan Barry, basically sharing like all the things that they learned in their 3.5 years of working together on ConvertKit and growing it from 3 million to 30 million a year. Like I said, he's since moved on. ConvertKit continues to grow, but Barrett is a super smart guy. So they were talking in this podcast episode, and they just briefly mentioned, the stuff that Ryan Holiday had talked about in that Trust Me, I'm Lying book still holds up today. And I was like, I need to get that one.
Yeah.
I don't know when that's going to slide in as a gap book or something. I don't think it's really bookworm material, but all of the other Ryan Holiday books are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I have not read the other two. I know of them, and I've listened to you talk about at least one of them. Which one would it be? Courage is Calling. Was that the latest one?
To be honest, I don't even know.
Yeah, as I say, I can't
Uh,
remember, but
Courage is Calling and Discipline is Destiny. I think Courage is Calling was first. And I liked that one a lot. Discipline is Destiny. I think I didn't like that one quite as much. And the backdrop for this book is that this is another book in the Stoic Values series, but it's been quite a while since the previous one had been released. And I think part of that was tied to this idea, because Ryan Holiday, I heard share this, that he thought this one would be this one would sell the worst out of all of the books in that series. When he pitched it to the publisher, he's like, "Hey, just so you know, this is the one that people aren't gonna like as much." And this one, I've seen him post on social platforms, was like the quickest one to the bestsellers list, which
oh,
is
really?
kind of interesting. But I think that's just because of the topic that this one tackles, which is justice in an unjust world. That's kind of the subtitle here. Follows the same format as the previous Stoic Values books. So there's an introduction. Well, first of all, it talks about the four virtues. Then there's an introduction. Then there are three parts. Part one is the me, that's personal. Part two is the we, which is social political. Part three is the all is one. And then the last part is a short afterword, kind of about his own personal journey and how Stoicism has benefited him. So I thought for the format of this book, we would probably just tackle the different parts and call out some of the things, little chapters, because there are lots of little chapters. They're all, for the most part, 3 or 4 pages long. He tells a lot of stories, and I tried to capture a couple of things from each one of those chapters in my map file here, just stuff that stood out to me. But I think that there's too much to try and grok, like all of the stories that he told, and they're kind of told in these bite-sized snippets anyways. So I think we'll probably just go through these sections and grab a couple each that we particularly liked. How's that sound?
It sounds good. The one thing I want to add is he'll start each part with like a main story or a main like historical narrative, and then he'll try to refer back to that through like the tiny little chapters that he has through. And when we say there's a lot of chapters, what, Mike, there's probably like 10 or 15 within each part. I mean, I'd say like there's a lot in there. So
Yep.
that's the thread that like holds it together. So for instance, the first one in part one was Truman. If I'm remembering correctly. Yeah. So Harry S.
Yep.
Truman, right? Like that's the major thread that runs through part one, but he'll do that for kind of each of the different parts to tie it all together.
Yeah, and I think part two, if I'm not mistaken, was Martin Luther King Jr., and
Yep.
then the part three was Gandhi. But that doesn't mean that he's not referencing those stories other places. Like you said, he does tie these together. And it's not just the stories in the first section that he ties together. He is an expert storyteller, and he weaves together a whole bunch of stories of a whole bunch of historical figures from people in modern history, like American history, all the way back to the lives of the Stoics, which is no surprise since he's got so much Stoic stuff. You know, it's kind of interesting. I think at this point, Ryan Holiday is probably the Stoic guy. Like that's what he's known for.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's the stuff that I really like from him though. So a little bit concerned maybe for the future of Ryan Holiday's book and my fandom of it, but I did enjoy this book.
So and you've read more on him. Trust me, we're gonna get to the book. So, but you've read more on him than I have. This one felt a lot like Mastery, right? Like
Kinda,
so
yeah.
the feel of it, and he worked with Robert Greene on 48 Laws of Power. So it's like, is this like his other ones? Like, is this a very similar style to his other books?
For the most part. So I
Okay.
think the one that he wrote before the Stoic Virtues series was, if I remember right, Stillness is the Key. And I really did enjoy that book, but that one very much had the 3-part formula and he told lots of little stories. The ones before that, which Ego is the Enemy is the one that I actually have not read. But then there was The Obstacle is the Way.
Okay.
Man, that was like one of the first books that we covered for Bookworm. So I had to go back into the archives. That one I liked a lot. This one is like, so his writing style, I wouldn't say it's completely different or anything, but it's definitely evolved, and you can see that.
Evolved. Okay. All right, good. Let's go ahead and get into it then.
All right. So the first section, and this maybe isn't going to be very long, but we should call out the 4 virtues section.
Mm-hmm.
And probably this is the same in every single one of these books. So maybe I've even repeated this previously. But essentially, there are 4 virtues, 4 stoic virtues, and they're tied to the story of Hercules. The legend goes that Hercules stood at a crossroads. There were 2 goddesses there. One offered him a life of ease. He could have everything that he wanted. Another one offered him a life of virtue, and this is going to be a hard life, but this type of life will produce the character of a god. And so he took the hard road, and the 4 virtues that are tied to that are courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom. So spoiler alert, the next book in the series is going to be about wisdom. That one actually I'm very excited for. I'm interested to see his take on that. But the virtues essentially are designed to act as a compass, and virtue is something that we actually do. It's not just something that we believe. So my pastor has a saying that the word you believe is the word that you actually do, and I really think that's true. It goes beyond just Bible study, but you can read these books and collect all these ideas, capture all these notes. Oh, that was so good. It was life-changing. Well, what are you doing different as a result?
Yeah.
If it's nothing, then what was the point?
Yeah, so I would say I didn't know the story of Hercules. This is I like the idea of thinking about the stoic virtues. I don't agree completely with all of them, that they're like the end all be all, and I'm not saying he would say that they're the end all be all, but I agree that they're all important. To bounce into the intro a little bit, he says that justice is the most important of the virtues, which I think that's funny because he told his publisher this book's probably not going to sell the best, but this is the most important of the topics from all of those. And I want to reflect on that. Like, do I think, or Mike, I'll pose this question to you, on the spot. What do you think? Courage, temperance, justice, wisdom. Like, what do you think in your mind is the most important of those virtues?
Well, I don't know, but if I had to take a stab at it, I would probably guess that wisdom is the most important, followed by justice. So kind of like a reverse order here. I don't know that is accurate necessarily, but that's my first impression.
Yeah, I would have said the same thing. Like, I think, but to lay my cards on the table, I think that's because, from a biblical standpoint, I think, biblical wisdom, leads to righteousness and leads to all these other things. So it's like, I think that's why I would say wisdom is the most important for me as well. So thank you for entertaining my on the spot, which one of these is the most important?
Well, I think you would probably agree, because I mean, the title of this book, The Right Thing Right Now. So doing the right thing at the right time, essentially. How do you even know what the right thing is? There has to be some sort of wisdom applied here. And I think he kind of alludes to that in the contents of the book, but doesn't go hard on that because there's a whole nother book coming about that particular topic.
Yep. And he had a lot to say about this one too. So, it's not like he was struggling for things to say.
Yeah. I feel like they are getting longer. This one was like 340 pages. So maybe the next one will be 400. I don't know. All right. So after that, there is a short introduction, which there's just a couple of things I jotted down here. He pointed out that there is no virtue to counterbalance justice. Justice is what it is. He also says that until we stop debating, we can't start doing, and that justice is holding the line. So what line is that? The line between right and wrong. And again, that's kind of why I feel like wisdom is the foundational part of this, which we'll get to at some point. But yeah. Anything else you want to say about the introduction?
Yeah, so I pulled a quote out of here. The presence of injustice instantly renders any act of virtue, and then he says courage, discipline, wisdom, any skill, any achievement worthless or worse, right? So it's like if we're doing something that is unjust, even if it's courageous, so, oh wow, look how courageous they were, but it was unjust. Look how disciplined they were, but it was unjust. Look how, and this is the one I don't understand. Like I'm trying to wrap my head around. Look how wise they were, but it was unjust. And in my mind, those two things, like, they contradict each other. If I'm doing a wise thing, it's going to be a just thing, but maybe I just haven't processed on this enough. But I like the major point here. It's like, if we're doing a courageous, disciplined thing, but it's not the right thing, yeah, like we're gonna render that worthless, and we're gonna render that as like a bad overall thing that was done. And I think we see this all the time, right? We see this where somebody's held up on this pedestal, and they're put up on this pedestal where, oh my gosh, look at how much, they dedicated their life to that thing. Look how much they were disciplined in doing that and waking up every day, but it was the wrong thing for them, their family, society, whatever it might be. And it's like, like the sub thing is like interesting, but then the major thing just cuts it away. Like it cuts the foundation off of it. So I thought he made a really good point there, that we really have to be doing the right things for everything else to matter.
Yeah, and the right thing, I feel like, can be different on the different levels that he's talking about in this particular book, which just makes it more complicated and confusing, maybe.
Well, and I think one of the things that he doesn't address, and I can kind of understand why he doesn't address, is what does the right thing mean? So the right thing for me, and the right thing for you, and the right thing for any of the listeners, like, we could debate that all the time, like over and over and over again. I mean, and we do, these are ethical discussions and discussions of morality. And it's like, well, okay, well, in this situation, what is the right thing to do? And I don't think you and I should go into that right now, because that's a whole tangent topic. But like, that's a challenge, right? Like, I think he hits some of them that are more universal, I would say. Like, he hits the ones that are more agreed upon, and it's, you don't really have a super strong argument on it. But there are some other ones where it's, you see people do it all the time, where they're debating what the quote unquote right or just thing is, and why that's the case, and why it's not. And I think that's another book, but I think that book's been written a bunch of times, right? Like, these are the books that tend to have the word ethics in the title. So
yeah, well, that's actually a great place to get into the first section. So let's go there. The first part is the me, personal, and kind of what you were alluding to is covered again in the last chapter of this section, which is right thing, right now. A couple things that I jotted down here are: the right time for the right thing is always right now. You do have to figure out what the right thing is. And I think I would argue the right thing being the thing that is in line with your values. Values can be shaped a lot of different ways. I think what he's trying to do in this book is essentially get people to think about the different layers. So if you look at someone who thinks they're doing the right thing because they're just looking at it from, this is going to benefit me, then getting them to consider, well, what about everybody else that's on the team? Or even further, part 3 is all about, what about all of humanity? What about everyone else on this planet? Have you thought about how this decision actually impacts those people? And I think that's the big win for most people. The human brain, I don't think, is naturally wired to think about others that way. We need the reminder. There are times when we do. I've heard it said that love is the desire to benefit the other at the expense of self. So when you love someone, that's cool. That's easy to do, right? I care about them as an individual, so I'll sacrifice something for myself personally. Seems like the right thing to do. But then you're supposed to love your enemies. So what now? Like, but I don't want to. Like, exactly. Where's the balance there? And you're right. He doesn't give you clear cut, this is how I would define this, but that's because I think you have to struggle with this yourself, and it has to be personal. But one thing that I think once you do that is important, and he calls out in this last chapter of this first part, is that discipline is often a battle against procrastination. So I think, just speaking for myself, a lot of times I can feel like I know what the right thing to do is. And he's encouraging us that if you know what the right thing to do is, then right now is the right time to do it.
Yep.
Okay. So don't delay those things. And how often am I guilty of that? And to hear it defined as procrastination kind of hurts a little bit, because I'm supposed to be this productivity guy.
Yep. That's funny.
But if I'm honest, then this is a struggle sometimes.
Yeah. I tying into what you said, the chapter right before that is the choose the North Star.
Yep.
And I really like how that leads into the right thing right now, because it's like whatever your North Star is going to be, that's where you're setting the what is right. Like what am I going to consider right in different contexts? And one of the nuances I think that comes here is like I don't think there's necessarily one North Star. Like I think there's an overarching North Star. Like I'm shooting towards this, but I think there are North Stars in the different areas of my life. And when I'm thinking about the right thing right now, it's in the context of that thing that I'm doing. Some of them will be more overarching and they'll encompass a couple different buckets of my life, but others will be more specific to a certain bucket of my life. So I think really where from out of this first part is really thinking about like, what's that North Star? What are those values? What is that thing I'm going to reach for or pursue or, hold above from a goal? Goal is the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Like from a striving toward standpoint, like what am I going to do? I think the other things in this part are good, like smaller pieces. It's like, oh, tell the truth, take responsibility, be an open book, be decent, do your job. Like, I think these are good and these are all good practices, but those last two parts are really the take home, the meat of part one is like, if we can set our values, figure out what that North Star is, and then do that thing and do it daily, shoot for that thing and shoot for it daily. And then the part I think where I know you're a big fan of this with personal retreats and with reflections and that, can we really reflect back on it? He doesn't hit this much, but can we reflect back on it? Can we take a time when we say, okay, this is a time when I actually did the right thing and went towards that North Star. Here's a time where I shirked responsibility and I didn't, or I procrastinated, or I was off the mark. And what can I learn from that? And I think that would be a good, more actionable side of, can I really identify those things? And then all the other stuff I think just builds on that.
Yeah, well, I think you're right that a lot of the stuff that I make is kind of tied to values-based productivity, maybe, for lack of a better term here. So I did really like the discussion of the North Star. I like the term he used, pleonexia, which is a self-serving life, what the Greeks believed to be the worst kind of life. So I think, there's lots of little things that he drops in here and there like that, which are just additional pieces to the puzzle for me, and they help me see it a little bit more clearly. But essentially what he's advocating for is what you were just describing and what I try to do at the personal retreats. Identify your vision and your values, do your best to live those out. And then every 3 months, the whole purpose behind the personal retreat process is you need a mechanism to help you come back and get your bearings again. He says that in this section. One of the things I jotted down in the mind map, we will lose our bearings, but we need to get it back. So how do you actually do that? You have to take all this stuff into consideration. And so that's part of the process for me. I consider the life theme. I consider the values. I take stock of where things are at. Am I moving in the right direction? What should I stop and keep doing? And you don't have to follow my format, obviously, but Ryan Holiday is essentially advocating for the same sort of thing. And I think it really is that simple. Decide what's really important. Try to live your life in accordance with those values. And then every once in a while, ask yourself, how the heck am I doing? Make adjustments where necessary. But I do want to mention, because you shared a couple of the titles of the different chapters. And if you just take those at surface value, you can be like, oh, well, I already know that already. I don't need to read this. You haven't heard it the way that Ryan Holiday is going to be describing it. Because there are a lot of these things, I'm looking at the mind map, a lot of these things like, yeah, I understand the principle behind taking responsibility, but I jotted down there, before we can take responsibility for another life, we need to take responsibility for our own. Now that is kind of like, I've heard the story about when you're getting on the airplane, they tell you put your own oxygen mask on first before you assist your kids. Because if you've pass out, then you're no good to anybody. But Ryan Holiday has a way of saying this. It's like, this is the fundamental thing. I'm not going to wrap it up in a cute little analogy that's going to sound good in a soundbite, but just bam, here it is. You need to wrestle with this. And so he asks, another question he asked from that section, am I someone who does a great job, or am I someone who does the minimum? Because taking responsibility isn't just, well, I did the thing. There you go. What are you upset about? Did you give it your best effort? He's the kind of guy I feel like we would be pretty good friends, because you can tell by the way that he writes, he doesn't have a high tolerance for people who aren't going to do things with excellence. And I definitely get annoyed by that myself. Like, come on. This is the best you can do. The very next chapter actually is be your own referee. I shouldn't have to say this isn't good enough. You should be able to tell, and like something should be going off inside of you. Like, I can't share this because it's not the best that I can do. He says in that section, one of the things, just as another example, something that really just kind of jumped off the page to me: without honor, victory is meaningless. Well, what does that mean? It means that, like, I'm trying to build this creator business, right? And I've been working hard for a long time. We talked in was it the pro show, or maybe just the first section, about the things that I've been trying to do to grow my email list and sell different products and things like that. Everyone in that situation wants it to happen faster. But I guess the way I think about this is, my goal has been 10,000 email subscribers. But if I could just pay somebody a couple grand tomorrow and they dump a bunch of names on my list, that's kind of the meaningless victory in my opinion.
Well, it's like buying an Instagram account that already has 100,000 followers, right? Like, I mean, I remember when that was a big thing going around. It's like, oh, we sell Instagram accounts that have this many followers, but who are they? Like, and they're not connected at all,
Exactly. The obstacle is the way. The publishing good stuff every week, so that people don't want to unsubscribe from the newsletter. That's the slog, but it's also the thing that makes the victory worthwhile once I eventually get there. So I just love the style that Ryan Holiday writes, like the way that he writes. And as he's going through these things, which are basically doing the right thing for yourself. And it's not all just, without context to other people. He says in Realize Your Potential, for example, that you're not here for yourself, and to whom much is given, much is expected. But just considering, what is right by me, the way that he writes it, I instantly can fill in the blanks with all of these different examples of what this looks like for me. And, oh, you know what? I should really tweak this a little bit, or that's a good reminder. I really need to double down on this. Interestingly, I don't have a ton of action items from this particular book, but there's lots of good encouragement here, which I think is just sort of course correcting vision adjustment at this point in the book for me.
Yeah, I would say a couple things came out for me during part one. One, he's incredibly well read, incredibly well researched, and communicates and summarizes and like ties ideas together very, very well. So that was good. The other one would be like, these are just really good. You said course correction, did you say course correction? Is that the last thing you said?
Yeah.
But it's like, these are really good reminders to where even if you go back to it and you just look through the different chapter titles, we have our mind maps, but like, even if somebody doesn't do what we do and take these crazy mind map note things, even if you go back and just look at the chapter titles, you can pretty quickly go, okay, I'm doing an okay job there. Like I'm struggling on that one. Like I'm doing an okay job there. I'm struggling on that one, and it's a way to course correct, and then you can dive into the one that you actually care about, or the one that you need to focus on more. I think that was a good one. Overall, like I said, I don't have like a ton of like things that really, really jump out at me. It's like, oh my gosh, that was life changing. But at the same time, I'm reading through this going, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, yeah, that's a good point. Like, and I can't, the number of times I did that was kind of fun. It was fun in a book.
Yeah. One other example, there's this chapter in here called Be an Open Book, which really challenged me. He mentions that being a leader means you have chosen to be a public figure. Well, I'm not a I wouldn't call myself a public figure, but the truth is that I do have leadership positions in different places. I'm an elder at my church. I'm co-host on this podcast. Like, my life is public in some way, shape, or form. And I've learned over the years that just comes with the territory. And essentially what he's admonishing us to do in this section, he says, try not to do anything that requires walls or curtains. If you're inclined to hide it, you probably shouldn't do it. And you could read that and be like, well, wait a minute. So I don't get to have any privacy? Like, that's not what he's saying, but he's sort of saying it. Mm-hmm. He's saying it in a way that you could very easily get offended with this and be like, no, I'm not going to do it that way, and tune him out for the rest of the book. Or you could be like, you know what? Maybe he's right. And so like, that's one of the spots, like, you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe I need to do a little better job of living above reproach, for lack of a better term. Like, I got to be really careful about the things that I say and the things that I do, because someone somewhere, I mean, all parents know this, your kids are watching you all the time, and
yep.
they're going to replicate what you do more than what you say.
Yep.
And you can hide behind, well, I didn't mean it that way, and they should think the best about me. Or you could take responsibility and be like, you know what? I shouldn't have said it that way. Or I shouldn't have said that. You don't even need to say it that way. Like, you don't have to have a justification. Like, just accept the fact that as a leader, you're under a microscope. It is what it is. And the quickest way to get buy-in from everybody that you're trying to lead is to say, you know what? My fault. I'm sorry. I'll do better next time.
Yeah. So the same section there, he quotes Joseph Pulitzer. There's not a vice which does not live by secrecy, right? And it's the whole, like, a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square kind of thing. And it's like, that doesn't mean that everything that you do in private or in secret is a vice, but that means that, like, vices, you're gonna try to, like, hide those from people, and you're gonna try to be secret about those, so there's that. And then he talked about the city on a hill, right? You hear the quote about, city on a hill, blah, blah, blah. Everyone looks at, okay, I think that's where most people stop. He says, be the city on the hill that everyone looks at and respects, and sees and goes, oh yeah, that's good, that's just. I like those two quotes out of there as well. So
nice. Ready to go on to the next section?
I am.
All right. So the next section, part 2, is the social political. And this is really just like the people that are on your team, for lack of a better term. We were talking about ourselves in part 1. Part 3, we're talking about everybody. Part 2 is kind of like the people that we would surround ourselves with. And again, lots of different chapters here. And I want to start with the one on start small. So one of the stories that he tells here is about Mother Teresa. And he has this quote from Mother Teresa, which I think is amazing, that if I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will. And he's basically encouraging us in this chapter to take the first step. No change is possible without that first tiny step, he says. And says that as humans, we tend to think big picture before we think little picture. And I'm definitely guilty of this myself. But essentially, like, this is something that I've known already. It's a good reminder, and it's something that I probably need to action on more. But, just do what you can do where you are with what you have. One of my favorite Bible verses is Zechariah, I think it's 4:10, which says, do not despise these small beginnings. The Lord rejoices to see the work begin. And you could take that, like, you don't have to have a Christian belief system in order to apply that principle. It's essentially what Ryan Holiday is talking about here. In fact, he incorporates a lot of different stories from a lot of different religions.
He does.
And he references a lot of Bible verses and a lot of Bible stories. And he frames them in ways which, you could argue with theologically, but that's not the purpose of this book. He's just kind of, this is what Jesus did.
Yep.
You're like, yeah, you're right. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the one that stood out to me on this one was see how the other half lives. And I know that this is the one that really will, I guess, pull at the heartstrings, for me, where it's like, it's so easy to get caught up in my routine, my daily, where it's like, this is just what we do, and this is how I do things, and this is how my family does things, and this is, and then, you get shocked out of that, and you get into a situation, a context, or an environment, a culture, something like that, and you're like, oh my goodness, like this is nothing like my everyday, right? This is completely different. So an example of this would be you're going to a different part of town, right? So Denver's huge. You go to a different part of town and you're like, wow, this part of Denver is very, very different than the part of Denver I live in. Or you go overseas, right? Like, and you see like a different kind of a culture, and you see the way they operate. And I think like the thing that gets me about this, he's going to tie it into injustice and justice, and kind of how the other half lives, whether it's just or unjust. But like, I think there's a bigger idea here that's just like, we need more experiences. We need more diverse experiences to see what's happening in the world, how it's happening in the world, and get out of our own little, focused bubble. I think this ties into something that's in part 3, which is like expand the circle. Because if we don't see these things, how can we expand the circle? If we don't interact with these things, like this was definitely one of the chapters that jumped out to me. And he quotes in here, we should seek out experiences that show us what other people experience daily, and whether they're really close to us, or whether they're like close, meaning like their life is like ours, or whether their life is significantly different. I think the more of those experiences we get, the more well-rounded we'll be, and the more we'll be able to be just broadly.
100%. Another section I liked in here was growing a coaching tree. Do you know who Greg Popovich is? Are you a basketball fan?
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm not very a basketball fan, but it's hard to not know who Greg Popovich is. So
yeah,
I live in the United States.
I did not realize. So that's the story that he's telling here. Greg Popovich, I believe he's still the coach of the San Antonio Spurs. He's getting older now, but essentially the point that they're making is that a lot of the head coaches that are in the NBA today can be traced back to they were on Greg Popovich's staff. And I've seen a couple different places where he's given specific people like Tim Duncan and for blanking on the woman's name that he mentions, Becky, who became a WNBA coach, but like they got their shot essentially underneath Greg Popovich. And I remember watching the game where I'm feeling really bad that I forgot her name, but she was the first woman to coach a game in the NBA because she was high on the assistant ladder, and he intentionally gets himself thrown out of a game so that she can have the experience.
Okay. Becky Hammon.
Becky Hammon. Thank you.
I didn't know it. You did a great job getting Becky. Becky Hammon. She's a Las Vegas Aces coach.
Yeah. So now she's a coach for the WNBA, but he's constantly putting people in positions where they can do things. Essentially, he's opening doors for people. And I forget the percentage, but there's a very high percentage of all the coaches in the NBA that like got their start under Greg Popovich. And that's interesting because that's a very different side of him than you see when you watch games on TV. He's kind of famous for when they do they'll interview the coaches between like the first and second quarter or the third and fourth quarter, depending on the home coach or the away coach. This is a different slot. And he's kind of famous for being really, really short with those reporters. And like you can tell when they're doing a Spurs game, they get all nervous because they don't want to ask a question in a dumb way that's going to set him off. Yeah. Because he'll just be like, that's stupid, and walk away. And so that's like the public persona of Greg Popovich, but obviously all of his players really enjoy playing for him. He's been with the Spurs for a really long time, so he's got like a pretty crazy legacy there. But it was kind of cool to hear how much he goes out of his way. It's a very different side of him that you don't see on TV. Like the people that are with him, he does his best to propel them to like beyond where he would go, which is essentially what you want to do as a parent. You want your kids to go further and do more than you've been able to do. And it's one thing to say that in the position that he has, like, oh yeah, I want, whoever comes after me to be better. But it's a totally another thing to actually apply that, actually live that out by your actions. And he's done it consistently for a really long time, because the proof is that all of these people can be traced back to, oh yeah, I got my start under Greg Popovich. Yeah. It encourages me. I'm not in a position like he is, and I can't open those kinds of doors for people, but I can do what I can where I am. So look for those opportunities, I guess, is the takeaway there.
Well, and I think this is cool because that's an example, but I think if you looked, and you don't have to look very hard, you can see this example in music, you can see this example in teaching, you can see this example in business, where it's like the tree goes up and it will make it to like a person or two, and then all of these successful people come out of having worked with that person or two, or they worked at this company, or they all started, and they were all like middle managers at this one company, and then they all spawned off and like started their own things, and they were all successful, but they can all trace it back to the leadership or the training that they got there. So I think there's a lot of different situations where you can see the evidence of this, and this is probably the area where, I don't know if it's the teacher in me or what it is, this is the area where it's like, I want to do this. Like, it's like, I want to figure out a way to be the rock that launches, that's probably the wrong metaphor, but you know what I mean? Like, to be like that thing that launches all these other successful people. That actually sounds way more exciting to me than me being the ideal successful people is. But to be able to look down and be like, yeah, like they did a good job, they did a good job, they did a good job. And I had a small piece in that. Like, I had a really small piece in them being successful. I want to tie two together as I talk about the next one. And I think you have to tie them together or else it gets tricky real fast. So develop competence and then make good trouble. And the reason why I tie these two together is because I really like the idea of make good trouble. I think we as a society are too afraid to push back, to make trouble, to be confrontational, but in a good way. Like, so like there are the people who do it and you're like, yes, you're doing it wrong. Like, that is not the way you want to do this. You're actually going to get into trouble. And then there's the people who do it well and they come at it from they're causing trouble again, but they're right. And like, we all kind of need that, and we all needed to hear that, and change will happen out of that. And that's more of what he's talking about here. Is he's talking about those people who, yes, they're causing quote unquote trouble, but they're doing it in the right way for a good cause for the right reason. Now, I think an important piece of this is the develop competence, because I think if you don't develop the competence first, it's really hard to make good trouble. You make trouble, but you don't make good trouble. And it's because you don't know the right ways to make trouble. Like you end up making trouble in ways that are that miss the point, or that are doing the wrong thing. So competence is basically like you're incredibly skilled at your thing. Like, you are the expert, the leader, the people that everyone looks to if they want to know how to do the job right, or get things done, or they would go to you to get things done. So it's like, if you were that person and then you come into the meeting and you're like, listen, I'm going to stoke this fire. Like, I'm going to poke and figure out, I'm going to poke the bear, if you will. Right. And everybody looks at it and they're like, wow, well, if he's doing it or she's doing it, maybe there's something there. And like, it just gives you a different perspective on it. So I like these two pieces tied together. Holiday didn't tie them together, but my brain wanted to tie those two pieces together.
Yeah, I think you're right. One other thing from this section that I liked was the section on creating alliances. And the story that he tells here is of Harvey Milk, who I believe was a governor or some person in local politics in California.
Yeah, all I know is politician. So former member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I'm looking him up right now. I'm cheating.
That's okay. The thing that is important for the story here is that he was a open homosexual at a time when that was not accepted. And essentially the way that he got his message out was that he created these alliances with other people who vehemently disagreed with him on certain things, but they were able to find common ground. And this story is impactful to me because I don't think that I could picture myself in some of those stories, I guess, just like very much different opinions about certain things. But essentially what he was able to do was to add new and diverse voices as allies. And then eventually those things allowed, those alliances that he had made, allowed him to achieve certain things based on, causes that he was supporting. And I call this out because we're fairly open about our Christian faith and our perspective on things in the podcast. I see a lot of people around me not wanting to embrace different points of view and create allies of people who think differently than them. And it convicts me. Like, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to surround myself in my own little bubble. Going back to liminal thinking again, the bubble of belief. People who look, sound, talk, act exactly like I do. And then there you go. This is reality. It's not. And I think that by creating these alliances, by looking for people who are, I want to say, intentionally different, like finding people who are in different phases of life, who believe different things than I do, and trying to understand their perspective, not with the intention of, well, maybe I need to change some of my convictions, although sometimes that happens. The church that we're at, I said at one point, that's the last church I will ever set foot in through a set of circumstances. That's where I am now, an elder. Like, I changed my mind about things.
Yep.
And I think that's good. We should be looking to not just collect new information, but we need to be constantly asking ourselves, like, where am I not understanding things fully? But that's not even the point of the chapter here. The point of the chapter here is, you're different than me. You live somewhere else. You believe something else. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't connect. In fact, it probably is an argument that we should connect, because the big takeaway from these stories is that people saw Harvey Milk on the surface of this is what he stands for, and they're like, oh, I hate that guy. But then when they got to know him, they ended up being on his side for different things. One of the examples they share is the Teamsters Union for, like, the truck drivers. That was an important alliance, and they were able to find common ground there. And so this is I think my one action item from this whole book. There are lots of things that, even from what we've talked about today, where you could say, well, that's kind of an action item. That's kind of an action item. This is the one that felt significant enough that I needed to codify it as an actual action item. It's one of those ones that you'll never be able to say, did I do this or not? Constantly be on the lookout for new allies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
not who can I get on my side, but just like, who can I make connections with? Because you don't know where these relationships are going to go, and you don't know when these connections are going to be valuable in the future. But if we're really trying to do the right thing at the right time, we should constantly be trying to understand where the other side is coming from. And again, that doesn't mean just because they say this thing like, oh, well, now, obviously, because we've mentioned it multiple times on this podcast, I may as well just go all the way down the rabbit hole, right? As Christians, we consider the Bible to be the code of conduct that we live by, right? And a lot of this stuff that Ryan Holiday's talking about, replace stoic virtues with specific Bible verses, and you've got the exact same thing.
Yeah.
But you could say, well, that's, I'm not trying to conform, what I believe about the Bible based on these other data points and other people's experiences. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, by connecting with other people and understanding other contexts, it gives me better understanding of the convictions that I'm holding a lot of times. And again, I'm not afraid to say, strong convictions lightly held. I was wrong about this. That's happened multiple times. I could make a list of all the things that Mike was wrong about, but I see so much benefit that comes from looking beyond the me and the we. So this is kind of like, for me, the point where we're probably transitioning into part 3 after this. All the other people that you typically don't see, all the other people that it's inconvenient to think about them a lot of the times. Like, those are the people that Jesus went after. That's who I should be focusing on.
Yeah, I mean, I think where this gets mixed up a little bit in my mind is people think allies is best friends. And I don't think that doesn't have to be the case. Allies are two people that find common ground around something. It doesn't have to be around everything. But it's around something. It's like, oh, okay, in this context, you and I. And where this gets really meaningful for me, and where I think everything you said is spot on, is where this gets really meaningful for me is, okay, we said earlier in this book doesn't talk a lot about what the right thing is. Well, when I'm interacting with different people and then we make a partnership or like we become allies on this topic, well, on the things we disagree with, we have the ability now to talk about what the right thing is around what we disagree with. And that doesn't mean your perspective is going to change. That doesn't mean my perspective is going to change necessarily. We may walk out of that saying, nope, we both feel more strongly than we did before about our position. But like, there also is the other case where we might change our mind and be like, oh, I actually see the other side of that argument right now and how that works. And I think if you take it from the perspective of allies doesn't mean we agree on everything and we have to be best friends. Allies means we're open to the idea that there might be common ground somewhere. And
Yes.
if that common ground somewhere benefits people, benefits society, benefits the mission that we're trying to accomplish with whatever we're trying to accomplish, man, that's a positive. So yeah, I'm glad you brought up the allies one, because I don't think I would have, and I like that a lot.
The thing, just to put a period on the sentence for this topic, I think is what you were saying, and kind of what I really want to just drive home is that when you're talking about creating these alliances with people who believe differently than you have to have the conversations. You aren't afraid to talk about the things that you disagree with, and you're not going to get violent and come to blows, although there's plenty of historical examples of how that happened. He even shared the story, like the guy that was in an alliance with Harvey Milk ended up shooting him in the head and murdering him. Like that's not the goal. But the thing that the takeaway for myself and everyone listening to this, I think, is that you can't just sweep all that stuff under the rug. It's an important part of humanity and who we are. And we should be able to have adult conversation about it without people flying off the handle. I feel like that's missing a lot. It's like, oh, well, that's private. You just keep that to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And then there will always be people who just push it a little bit further. Well, yeah, that's private, but I can't believe people think this. And so they'll share that on social media and they'll get a whole bunch of people like, yeah, how dare that guy, you know?
Yep.
And then we just create this tribalism because we won't talk to people. It's stupid.
I agree. Yes, I agree completely.
All right. Exit soapbox. Should we go on to part 3?
Yes. The all.
All right. So part 3 is the all. And this is, as it says in the title, thinking about kind of humanity in general, everyone on the planet. So as I mentioned before, this is the previous section. We're going from talking about the people that are on our team to everybody who's not on our team. That's really what this is about. And lots of different things here that I could call out, I guess. Well, let's start here. So we actually covered a book previously, not you and I, but before you joined the podcast, Cory, we covered a book called The Second Mountain by David Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
And he refers to that in the second chapter of this section, Climb Your Second Mountain. And that book was really impactful for me. I'm not sure you know anything about this book?
I don't remember much, so go for it.
Okay. So if I were to paraphrase the entire book, and Ryan Holiday does a great job of it here, that we typically spend the first part of our lives very ambitious, trying to achieve things. We climb this mountain, we get to the top, and then we feel depressed and we're like, is that it? And then we look around and we see, oh, there's a second mountain over there, and that's the one I should have been climbing the entire time.
Okay.
And that second mountain is always about someone else. So the first one is like, I'm going to do this for me. I'm going to become great. And then the second one is really, I'm going to help other people become great. I'm going to champion a cause. I'm going to help other people. I'm going to pay it forward. You know, all of the rest of the themes that he talks about in this particular section. So I think that second mountain idea is really powerful. And again, I do really recommend that book. As it pertains to this book, it really doesn't matter what that second mountain is. It just has to be about more than your personal well-being. And then kind of coupled with that, I think he mentions that as we get older, ambition starts to burn away. And I guess I'm old enough where I'm starting to experience this, where I don't really care so much about what sort of success I'm able to achieve. Yeah, I've got the goal of 10,000 email subscribers and I want to be able to provide for my family and all that kind of stuff. But really the thing that keeps me going, the thing that really gives me energy is when I am able to help somebody else. So the very best case scenario here is that I can make a good living helping other people do things that they want to do. And I'm still trying to figure out how exactly to do that best.
Yep.
But we're getting there. I'm making progress. And I think this is worth calling out to all listeners of the Bookworm podcast, whether you are, in high school listening to this because you like the books that we're reading, or you're a seasoned veteran who thinks that your season of life has passed. It hasn't. And whether you are 17 or 77, this is something that we should all be keeping in mind.
This part 3 was actually my least favorite section of the book. It wasn't that it was bad. It was just, it felt, I don't know. It felt more ethereal is the word that's coming to my head, but I don't know if I know what I mean by that. But it was more like out there. So if you talk about, give them hope, be an angel, forgive, and make amends, like the ideas were just more abstract or more like kind of out there. I also had very little background knowledge on Gandhi. So that was interesting to me. Like I was learning about, Gandhi. It was almost like a mini bio of Gandhi. Which was very interesting to me. Like one of my major takeaways was Gandhi's 7 blunders of humanity. So wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, religion without sacrifice, and then politics without principle. I thought those were really interesting, and like I need to go read. That's maybe an action item for me. Did he write on those? Like, does Gandhi have like a tome that like talks about those seven blunders? I'd be shocked if he didn't. But I thought that was an interesting part of it. Another one that I liked because I resonate with this principle so strongly that like he was preaching to the choir. Stop asking for the third thing. So the third thing is like the extra recognition, the extra gratitude. Like I did the right thing. Now somebody tell me how awesome I am, right? Like that thing. And he makes this statement in here, and this is where you talk about like how he doesn't really sugarcoat it. He kind of just says it how it is, which I really like about holidays. Like you did what you were supposed to do. Just move on, like keep going, right? And it's like the doing is the reward. Like these are the quotes that he has. Like he makes these like one-off kind of statements in the book, and I was like, yes, like I completely agree. And maybe I'm jaded by this because I've worked with a group of people, or because I work with younger students who always want to be told like how good what they did is, right? And it's like, and I get that we all need to be told at some point, you're doing a good job, keep it up. You're doing a good job, keep it up. But like, I think I've seen the extreme of that where it's like, hey, that tiny little thing you did, man, you put your name on the top right-hand corner of that paper. You really killed it. You really killed it there. And it's like, no, that's just what you do, right? Like you put the name on the file or on the paper. But like, that was my big one, is like, stop asking for that third thing, in terms of just do the right thing and do it right now. Just do the right thing and do it right now, and just keep moving.
Yeah, in terms of impact, I've heard it said that it's amazing what we could accomplish if we didn't care about logos or egos. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of tied to this. But there's also a quote that he shared, which is awesome. Better to do right and go unrewarded than to do wrong and go unpunished.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good
which
one.
I really like that as well. The other one that really, I guess, kind of stood out to me from this section was that love wins, which again, you could be like, oh yeah, I've heard that message before. But there was a question that he asked here, which kind of challenged me. So I remember the original Grinch movie growing up. Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So there's a part in that movie at the beginning where it's like the visual is permanently imprinted on my brain about how his heart is 2 sizes too small.
Yes. Okay. I know exactly what you're talking about. Go ahead.
Okay. So the question Ryan Holiday asks, and immediately evoked that image, was, is your heart growing or shrinking?
Okay.
Because I think it's difficult, and this is sort of tied to the creating alliances and like making your world bigger. right? That's what a growing heart does. But a shrinking heart is, let's batten down the hatches. Let's really put up the walls and protect what we have. Don't let anybody get in who might disrupt this. And that visual of your heart either growing or shrinking, because I think the principle here, which he didn't explicitly say this, but I think I would argue that nothing is static. It doesn't just stay the same. At least what he's talking about here in terms of growing or shrinking. It's not the actual physical size of your heart, but just how you feel. Like, is there room in your life for more people besides yourself? And that's a challenging question.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can't just be like, oh, yeah, I believe that. And of course, I will seek out people with diverse backgrounds and opinions and give them a seat at the table and listen to what they have to say. That's one thing to say that. It's another thing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got to put your life under the microscope and you got to say, have I actually done that? Or have I done it as much as I should? Sometimes you haven't done it because you haven't had the opportunity, but look for those opportunities then. That's kind of where I'm at with this, is like, look for those opportunities and embrace those opportunities, and don't just, well, I'm busy right now and I'll come back to that later. Going all the way back to the right thing right now. The procrastination being the thing that keeps us from doing the right thing. I don't have an action item associated with this necessarily, but it was a pretty effective way to end the book. And I say end the book because the very last chapter in this section comes right after that. And that's the whole idea of paying it forward, and all of us bear a great debt to those who sacrificed their yesterdays so that we could have better todays. We can't just be takers in this life. It's a really powerful way to end a discussion about justice, in my opinion. It's not fully the end because there's the afterword, but the end of this section anyways.
I hope Ryan got to write the title. Like, I hope it wasn't like part of the editorial process where somebody like else came up with it. Like, I really hope, because it is like, I think it's perfect, right? Like, the right thing right now. And the fact that you could pop it in, and he does it a few different times throughout the book where he pops it in like, right thing right now, right thing right now. And I'm like, daggone it, that is a really good title because he does it like in such a good way throughout the different parts of the book. So I really hope he was the brainchild behind the title.
Yeah, me too. All right, should we talk about the afterword?
Yeah.
Okay, so the afterword, I don't think that there's a whole lot I need to say about this, but it was interesting. I think he couldn't have written this afterword with for sure the first book and maybe the second book, but at this point he's been practicing Stoicism and talking about it long enough that it was interesting to hear about, this is kind of the way I was prior, and this is how it's helped me. And to be clear, I'm not sure I'm 100% on board with the idea of Stoicism. I think there are elements of it that I like. He mentions in this last section all the different things that he's written about and the things that he does about Stoicism. He mentions the Stoic coins, which I actually have one on my desk right here.
Oh, do you really? I went and looked them up, so that's funny that you have one. Okay.
Yeah, so the one that I have is amor fati, not merely to bear what is necessary, but to love it. So essentially, it's the love of fate. And kind of as it pertains to the things that he's talking about in this book, these things are happening. You could get upset that this is happening to you and this is completely unfair and I shouldn't have to do this. Or you could just be, this is the way that it is. May as well make the most out of it. And this experience is going to make me a better person in the process.
Yep.
And I feel like it's missed opportunity if you're just upset about, oh, this thing is unfair and I shouldn't have to go through this. I feel like you might get through that and you miss out on the virtue that could have been built in your life when you just resent it the whole time. So I don't know. I have it on my desk as like a reminder, like, hey, there's this difficult season that you're in. You can be upset that this is the difficult season is here, or you could be just embrace it and become a better person as a result. So I do think that there's value in some of this stuff, but like anything, like my approach to reading, you kind of have to test it out for yourself, take what works and spit out the sticks. He talks about in this section how time and experience should make us more generous and less threatened. No one throws you a parade when you're doing the right thing. he asks a question, are you being a good steward? Which that's the thing that got me into doing what I'm doing anyways. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
reading these books, and I was teaching a Bible college class on personal management and reading Matthew 25, the parable of the talents, which is all about biblical stewardship. I'm like, man, this is a big deal. Like we need to be good stewards of what we have been entrusted to. And for a long time that has fueled my life theme. At this point, it's gone through different revisions, but I'm a multiplier. I help people multiply their time and talent and leave a bigger dent in the universe. So that's very personal to me. And then one other like offhanded comment that he made is that men are struggling. It seems like with the culture, the higher percentages of women are able to succeed in these different scenarios where historically that hasn't been the case. But men in particular tend to be struggling with their role in society. And I think there's a much larger rabbit hole to go down there. I don't want to go down that today, but I will mention that I bought a book at a used bookstore that I came across that looked interesting by Lewis Howes. Are you familiar with Lewis Howes?
Not off the top of my head.
So Lewis Howes has an interesting story. One of those guys who he was living on a friend's sofa, hit rock bottom, and then built himself back up. He's an ex-football player, runs a very successful podcast and brand called The School of Greatness.
School of Greatness. I actually have seen this before. Okay.
Yeah. So he's written another book though, something about like the masculinity crisis. Something along those lines, which I have. I bought the book because it looked interesting, and I haven't picked it up yet. So I don't know exactly what's in there, but I think Ryan Holiday is onto something there, and I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. Maybe that book will make an appearance at some point in the Bookworm schedule. I haven't decided yet.
Gotcha. So my big takeaway from the afterward, well, let me say what I agree with you first. I definitely don't have any issues with the Stoic series, like with the 4 virtues and those type of things. But that's because I think they're founded in greater truths, right? That my belief system has these greater truths embedded in them. So I think they're good. So the Stoic series is fine with me. I think the thing that my biggest takeaway from the afterword is he talks about this idea that people typically start earlier in their life. They're more concerned with the all, and then they get more conservative as they age. And he said, what if it was different? What if it was the other way around? What if we were more conservative when we're young, and then we get more concerned with the all later in life? And I thought this was a really thought-provoking way to think about justice and to think about, okay, so if we are more conservative young, and therefore we're working on kind of ourselves and developing the virtues, and we're working on figuring out a lot of these things for the me and the we, how much more powerful will we be to impact the all when we get wisdom and when we get older in life and we have more courage, and risk is a little bit different because maybe we've established ourselves and we're able to do these other things. And it's like there's pros and cons to each of these. I can fully see the pros and cons to each of these, but the fact that he threw it out there as like a thought experiment, I thought, man, that's a really interesting way that I've not thought about, because you always think about, I'm more rebellious isn't the right word, but I'll take more risk. There you go. I'll take more risk at a young age, and then I get more conservative as I get older. Or I think more about like just retirement and, winding down, kind of a thing as I get older. What if it was the other way around? What if I got more adventurous and more about society and more about the all as I got older? And I was like, that's a really, really cool way to think about that.
Yeah, and that was actually spurred by a offhanded comment that his dad made at like a dinner one time about how just politically people tend to be more liberal when they're younger, more conservative when they're older. And Ryan's like, why is that? That shouldn't be the case. And I think I agree with that too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about action items.
Okay. You want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I had a couple. So the first thing is I want to plan new things into my reflections and my personal retreats. So the first thing I want to plan in is, are you thinking about whether you've done the right thing and whether you've followed your North Star? So it's that thing I talked about at the beginning when we were talking about part 1. I want to actually try to do that. So I go, okay, let's analyze the last week, 2 weeks, month, whatever, however long it is, and say, did I do the right thing in these situations, in these scenarios? And if not, why didn't I do the right thing? What could I have done to do the right thing? Where is it off? And then how do I do better next time? So I think that's my first action item, is to think about those things more actively in my reflections. The second one is I do want to look up Gandhi's 7 Blunders of Humanity and see if there's been anything written on that, whether or not that's packaged in, a series of short papers, or whether it's packaged in an actual book or a text of some sort, and take a look at that, because I think those would be interesting to unpack. How about you?
All right. Well, I just have the one official action item, which is to constantly be on the lookout for new allies. Although I think the impact of having read this book will manifest in multiple other ways. I don't know exactly how or when. That's the hard thing with picking action items from a Ryan Holiday book, in my opinion. But I do think this book was pretty impactful.
Yeah.
So I guess we're getting into style and rating now. I may as well just go there.
Yep.
I really like this book. I have had mixed reviews on the Stoic Virtue series. I really enjoyed Courage is Calling. I didn't enjoy Discipline is Destiny quite as much. But with this one, we're back, baby. Maybe it's just the subject, and justice is a thing that is important to me. So like the whole concept and the whole book about it seemed like the right thing at the right time for me. I remember my parents describing me at one point as being, they were talking to somebody else. They didn't know that I heard, I think, but they were describing me as being very self-righteous.
Okay.
And the reason is that I tend to see things as right and wrong. There is not a whole lot of gray area in my brain. This is the right thing to do, so just do it. So in a lot of ways, he's preaching to the choir here. Like, this is the message that I want to hear. But again, it's interesting because he doesn't just say this is where I draw all the lines. And he shares a lot of examples where you can tell, like, we've got some different belief systems, but that doesn't mean that I can't learn from the principles that he's talking about in this book. It may manifest a little bit different in my life. I weigh the Jesus examples more than the Buddha examples, but that's just me personally. And I actually appreciate the fact that he grabs a whole bunch of reference points outside of the Stoic philosophers, which is kind of his thing. It would be very easy to do that, I think. And he does talk about the Stoic philosophers. He talks about Marcus Aurelius, but he doesn't go nearly as hard on it as someone who is steeped in Stoicism could. I guess, I see an alternate scenario where he's like, oh, Stoicism is this thing that completely changed my life. Stoicism is all based on the philosophy of these old guys. So really, let's just talk about the old guys. And if people do that, I'm gone. I'm not interested in that at all. But because he sprinkles it in with a whole bunch of other things and a whole bunch of other examples and a whole bunch of really awesome stories, which again are woven together throughout this book, kind of like a tapestry. One of the stories we didn't talk about was the guy, I think his name was Cato. He was a prisoner in Carthage, and he goes back to Rome because they want to do this prisoner swap. And he gets there and he's like, no, don't do it. Just go. You're going to win. So keep up the fight. And instead of like staying with his family, he goes back. And then later on, he finishes the story about how when he got back, he was tortured and killed. Like, why would you go back? And his family's all sad because he's like, I have to do it. It's the right thing to do. They let me go so I could deliver this message. And then he goes back and he faces certain death. Stories like that are inspiring to me. Not that I want to be in that situation, but whenever I hear those stories of people who are giving their lives for a cause that's bigger than their own, I always admire the resolve that they have and the courage that they have to do the right thing. And you always kind of ask yourself, could I do that if I was in that situation? You'd like to think that you could, and you make daily decisions. Your secret of your success is found in your daily routine. So you can do the things daily that you believe are going to create the character that you may need to call on when you're in that situation, but you never really know till you're there. So part of the part of this, read all these stories about people who are making all these sacrificial choices. And sometimes it's just like, that's stupid. Why would they do that? Don't they know that they're going to be worse off because of that? But they can see bigger. They've got a bigger vision, and they understand how the world is going to be better because they are going to do those sorts of things. So this book is full of all those stories. You mentioned like the Make Good Trouble. That's actually a story that I had heard about previously from a different Stoic virtue series. I think maybe it was the Courage is Calling book. He talks more about that John Lewis example. So they're not all original, but a lot of them are. And a lot of them are told, even that John Lewis one, in ways that are new. It's not just rehashing, things that he's said previously. You can tell a lot of work went into this book in particular. I think, because we shared at the beginning, he didn't think it was going to do that well. He spent a little bit of extra time with it. And I think there's a lot of polish here that shows. And I definitely would recommend this one to, I would say, everyone. It's not even just the bookworm audience. Like, this is one where if I have any inclination that you're interested in doing more of what matters, like, this is one of the first books that I'm going to recommend for you. It's kind of weird to say like, well, this one stands out above all the other Stoic virtue ones, but it really does, in my opinion, so far. So I think this one is an easy 5 stars.
Yeah, I'll give my rating first. I agree. I think it's an easy 5 stars. I hope when the wisdom one comes out, that the wisdom and justice one can be paired together, and it's a 2-book set that you just recommend to people left and right. It's like, well, I just want to think about, making an impact on the world, or I want to think about like the way I'm living my life, or I want to think about this. It's like, boom, okay, here are these 2 books. Just go take them and peruse, and and you're gonna get good stuff out of them. I was a big fan of the way he weaved things together. The stories he told were actually relevant. The people that were referenced were relevant, and like, he doesn't, like you said, he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He doesn't like try to, he says the good and the bad. He doesn't say like, oh, they were perfect or they weren't or anything like that. It's like, here's what they are, and here's how it ties to the point I'm trying to make. So overall, I easily read through this one and walked away going, yeah, like that was a good one. This is one that I would actually listen to again while I'm running, just
Sure.
because there's good stuff in there, and like, stewing on some of these concepts or hearing it the second time, I think would be valuable for me as I go through. The one knock, if I have to, I don't have to, but it's like, there's one knock is the intro to each part. I didn't always see the tie into that right away. Like, it
Sure.
took me a little bit longer to get that intro. So it's like, these would be, if you're looking at the table of context right now, they're titled "To Stand Before Kings." To you from falling hands we throw the torch, and then to so love the world. Like, I didn't always see the tie-in for the content within those until maybe later on when he tied a couple other pieces back in. And it's like, I understand what he was doing. He's setting the stage, and he was kind of getting us thinking about this new part of the book. And but those would be, that would be the only one, and that's a very, very little, like very small kind of blemish on what overall was a fantastic book. So easily a 5-star book, easily one that I would recommend to other people to just think about justice and think about doing the right thing and doing it right now.
Yeah. And I feel like if everyone in the world bought this book and read it, even if they arrived at completely different conclusions of what that looked like, the whole idea of acting justly, it would have a significant impact in making the world a better place.
Yes, I agree. Yep.
All right. Let's put Right Thing Right Now on the shelf. What's next, Cory?
All right. So our next book is a book called Uncommon Greatness by Mark Miller. And I learned about this book. He was a former vice president. So Mark Miller was a former vice president of high performance leadership at Chick-fil-A. It's a leadership book. So 5 fundamentals to transform your leadership. And I just thought that, it would be a fun book to kind of get us an idea of a different perspective on leadership. So fairly new. He has a leadership consulting company. He's a best-selling author of a book called Culture Rules. So there's a little bit of face value credibility there. And I just thought another book on leadership from this perspective would be really interesting. So
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. After that, I have picked a book called Hidden Genius by Polina Marinova Pompliano. And you're probably thinking, what is this book? Who is that? I've never heard of this. And that was me prior to listening to a Barrett Brooks Good Work episode where he interviewed her. When I got the book, I realized that the blurb on the front cover is by James Clear.
I just saw that.
Yeah, he says a goldmine of actionable ideas and useful advice from top performers in all fields. And if you look at the back, the people who have recommended this, you've got, Morgan Housel. I guess the rest of, I saw some other names on the Amazon listing that I recognized. People whose opinions I respect, books I enjoyed. So the interview was really good. I will grab a link to that episode and I'll share it in the notes for people who want to check that out. But as she was talking about her book, essentially in that podcast, I got interested in it and I bought it. And I was looking through all the books that are on my bookshelf that we have not read yet. I was like, this one looks interesting. Then when I saw the James Clear blurb, I'm like, this seems like the perfect book for Bookworm. Let's give it a shot.
Wonderful.
All right. And then I do have a Gap book. And actually, before the Gap book, I have to go back and make a correction because I mentioned the Lewis Howes book and I misstated the name. It's The Mask of Masculinity. That's the book that I picked up. So links to everything we talked about is in the show notes as always. So it'll be right there. But
that makes me happy because I looked that up real quick and I was like, I couldn't find it. And I was like, that's weird. Like, how can I not find that? So
sorry about that.
No, thanks for the clarification.
Real-time feedback from myself. I've got a Gap book that I want to try to read. However, I'm getting ready to leave for London. I'll be at the Relay 10th anniversary show. So if you're there, come say hi. There's a book that comes out as we record this tomorrow, though, by a guy named Bob Dotto. It's called A System for Writing. And I have not pre-bought this yet because it's only available on Kindle for pre-purchase. But I have been told, because I've had some back and forth with Bob Dotto, that the paperback version will be available when it releases tomorrow. And it's basically about Zettelkasten, but Bob is actually someone who speaks intelligently about that in this space right now. So typically Zettelkasten, you hear about people who idolize Nicholas Lumens, and he did all these papers, and they're these academic people who construct these way too complicated obsidian type systems.
Yeah.
I feel like Bob actually does something with it, so I'm looking forward to reading this book. You got any Gap books?
Yeah. So I'm working on one that I've been working on for, I don't know, probably 4 months now or something like that. But it's oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on it. It's a work and worship book. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on the name of this book right now? Like
New rule: you can't pick a Gap book if you don't know what it is.
I feel so silly that I like can't remember the name of this book right now. Every Good Endeavor. Oh my goodness, why did it take me so long to get to Every Good Endeavor? But I've been working on it off and on as I read it, and then the other one I've actually kind of got two. It's called The Christian in Technology. It's a small book that it was written based by a guy who developed a chapel series for one of the seminaries out in California. And then everybody was like, hey, this is really good. Like, your series was really great. Can you turn it into a book? So I would call it more of a booklet. Like, it's a little, mini book. But I've been working through those two things and kind of popping back and forth as I can find time for those. So it's been good. That's part of my work as with the faculty job. So that's why I'm reading those.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening, and special thanks to the Bookworm Pro members. If you want to support the show, you can do that by going to patreon.com/bookwormfm. $7 a month gets you access to a couple of perks, a 4K Bookworm wallpaper, a bootleg feed that gets uploaded usually the same day as we record this, usually about a couple weeks before it goes live, a pro feed which has a separate section and is an ad-free extended version of the show. Today in the pro version, we talked about running gear. And if you are willing to support the show, it really means a lot to both Cory and myself. You may have noticed we don't have a ton of ads, so this is really the way to keep the show running. And if you want to support our work, then you can go to patreon.com/bookwormfm. And if you're reading along with us, pick up Uncommon Greatness by Mark Miller, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.